Picture this. You're living your best life. You have a job you're good at, a kid you love more than anything in this world, and you've just started seeing someone new. Nothing serious, just exciting. The kind of fresh start that makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, things are finally falling into place. And then, you disappear. Not dramatically, not with a chase scene or a struggle that anyone witnesses. You just vanish. Nobody. No goodbye, no trace. But here's the part that will keep you up at night. You keep texting. Your phone keeps sending messages. Hundreds of them, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Your name is still out there, on screens, in inboxes, in arguments, living, breathing, threatening people, except you are already gone, and someone else is wearing your life like a costume. Welcome to Elias Noir's True Crime Stories, where we shed light on stories hidden in the shadows. And before we go any further, if you're new here, make sure you follow, like, share, and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people, and there is a lot more where this comes from. Omaha, Nebraska, Council Bluffs, Iowa, Twin Cities sitting on either side of the Missouri River, the kind of mid-American suburbs where people mow their lawns on Saturday mornings, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, where nothing ever really happens. Or so you'd think. Because underneath that ordinary, quiet surface, something extraordinarily dark was already taking shape. A love triangle. A jealousy so consuming, so bottomless that it didn't stop at cruelty. It didn't stop at threats. It didn't stop at murder. It didn't stop for 4 years. Her name was Cari Farver, 37 years old, a single mother raising her son in Macedonia, Iowa, a small town so small that everybody knows everybody, and everybody knew Cari. She was smart, genuinely, impressively smart. A software developer at a time when that field was still predominantly male, and she was thriving in it. She understood code, systems, the invisible architecture that holds the digital world together. Which, when you think about what happened to her, carries a terrible, painful irony. She was also, by every account, warm, grounded, a good mom, the kind of woman who had real, tangible things to live for. On the night of November 13, 2012, Cari visited the apartment of a man she had recently started dating. His name was Dave Krupa, an auto mechanic, casually charming, the kind of guy who wasn't looking for anything serious, just company, just a connection. Cari spent the night, and then she walked out of that apartment, and no one who loved her ever saw her again. Now, when someone goes missing, there's usually a moment, a beat of silence before the alarm bells start ringing. A day, maybe 2, where people assume there's a reasonable explanation. Maybe she needed space, maybe she got busy, maybe she just moved on without saying goodbye. That's what people thought at first. But then, the messages started. Cari's phone, her number, her accounts, began firing off texts and emails at a relentless pace. To Dave, to her friends, to her family, to another woman in Dave's life, named Shanna Golyar, who went by Liz. The messages were strange, erratic, threatening, volatile in a way that didn't sound like the Cari anyone knew. They spoke of rage and obsession and a burning jealousy that seemed to come out of nowhere. People started to wonder, had they ever really known Cari at all? And that right there, that moment of doubt, was exactly what the person sending those messages was counting on. Because here is the truth that investigators would spend nearly 4 years trying to prove. Cari Farver wasn't sending those messages. Cari Farver was already dead. And the woman orchestrating this entire, elaborate, stomach-turning deception was someone who had smiled at Dave Krupa, played the victim, called the police on herself, all while secretly holding the phone that was supposed to belong to a woman she had already killed. Her name was Shanna Golyar. And what she pulled off was not a crime of passion. It was a performance, a calculated years-long psychological operation that manipulated law enforcement, terrorized innocent people, and nearly got away with it. Here's what makes this case different from every other true crime story you've heard. There was nobody, there still isn't. To this day, Cari Farver's remains have never been recovered, and yet, a jury still convicted Shanna Golyar of first-degree murder in 2017, because the evidence wasn't in the ground, it was in the data. Deleted photos with hidden metadata, blood evidence that had been scrubbed but not erased, digital footprints so precise, so damningly specific, that they told a story no amount of cleaning could wash away. This is a case that sits at the exact intersection of human obsession and digital forensics. It's a case that asks hard questions, questions we all need to be asking right now, in a world where our entire identities live on our phones. How safe is your digital life? How easy would it be for someone to steal it? And how long could they fool the people who love you? Over the course of this story, we're going to dig into every layer of this case: the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and most critically, the how. We'll examine how investigators finally connected the dots, how one photograph cracked the case wide open, and how the justice system convicted a murderer without a single bone to point to. We'll look at the ripple effects, the 2018 appeal that tried to unravel that conviction, the 2024 Netflix documentary Lover, Stalker, Killer that brought this story to millions of new eyes around the world, and the Cari Farver Memorial Scholarship that keeps her memory alive in a way that actually means something. Because this case isn't just about what happened in Omaha in 2012. It's about what it says about us, about the world we've built, the apps we trust, the strangers we let into our lives with a swipe of a finger. It's about how jealousy, left to fester and rot without intervention, can mutate into something monstrous. And it's about the quiet, unglamorous, painstaking work of the investigators who refused to let Cari Farver simply disappear. She was a mother, a developer, a woman who understood better than most how the digital world worked, and in the end, it was the digital world that both concealed her murder and exposed it. This is the story of Cari Farver, and it starts, like so many modern tragedies do, with a dating app, an apartment, and a night that should have been completely, utterly ordinary. Let's go back to the beginning. Before we talk about the crime, we need to talk about the people, because every true crime story, every single one, starts as a human story. People with names, people with families, people with ordinary Tuesday mornings, grocery lists, and plans for the weekend. And then something happens, and those ordinary lives become evidence. So let's meet the three people at the center of this case. Because once you understand who they were, really understand them, what comes next will hit you so much harder. Cari Farver. Say her name. Remember it. 37 years old, single mother, software developer. And by every single account from every single person who knew her, a genuinely good human being. She lived in Macedonia, Iowa. Now, if you've never heard of Macedonia, Iowa, that's not surprising. It's a tiny town, the kind of place where the population fits comfortably inside a high school gymnasium, Pottawatomie County. Quiet, the kind of place where people look out for each other, and Cari was exactly the kind of person a community like that produces. Grounded, warm, fun. Her mother, Nancy Rainey, described her as fun-loving, talented, and smart, the kind of daughter a parent brags about at the dinner table, not because she's perfect, but because she earned it, and she had earned it. Cari was working as a computer programmer at a time when women in tech were still fighting hard to be taken seriously. She understood code, she understood systems, she understood the way data moves, hides, and reveals itself. There is something so deeply painful about that detail when you think about it, that a woman who spent her professional life navigating the digital world would ultimately have her digital identity stolen, weaponized, and used against everyone she loved. But we'll get there. What you need to know about Cari right now is this. She was a mother first. She was raising a teenage son, balancing that enormous responsibility with a job that required her to commute from Macedonia to Omaha, Nebraska, 40 to 60 minutes each way, every day. Because that's what you do when you love your kid and you want to build something real. She had been through a previous relationship that hadn't worked out, and in the autumn of 2012, she was cautiously, carefully stepping back into the world, not looking for anything serious, just connection, companionship, the simple human feeling of being seen by someone. In late October 2012, she walked into an auto repair shop in Omaha, and she met a man named Dave Krupa. Dave Krupa, auto mechanic, Omaha local. By his own admission, a man who was very upfront about what he was, and was not, looking for. He wasn't after a relationship. He wasn't interested in commitment. He was casually dating, keeping things light. He had his apartment near 120th and Burt Streets in Omaha, his work, his life, and he was perfectly content to keep it exactly that way. He met Cari, they connected, and they started seeing each other casually. Nothing exclusive, nothing heavy. But here's the thing about Dave Krupa that becomes critically important as this story unfolds. He was also seeing someone else. Her name was Shanna Golyar. He'd met her on the dating app Plenty of Fish in early October 2012, just weeks before he met Cari. He was transparent about both situations, or at least he believed he was being transparent. He told both women he wasn't exclusive. He thought everyone was on the same page. He was catastrophically wrong about that. And the price of that misunderstanding, a price he had absolutely no hand in creating, let me be clear about that, was years of psychological torment that would unravel his entire sense of reality. But before we get to what happened to Dave, we need to talk about the other woman in this triangle. We need to talk about Shanna Golyar. Shanna Golyar, also known as Liz, also a presence on Plenty of Fish, also on the surface just another person navigating the world of online dating in the Omaha metro area. She lived in Persia, Iowa, Harrison County, just outside the metro region. Another small town, another quiet address. Nothing that would make you look twice. She'd been seeing Dave Krupa since early October 2012. Just a few weeks in, and in those few weeks, something had already shifted inside her. Something that Dave either couldn't see or didn't take seriously enough. Because while Dave was telling her, "I'm not looking for commitment," Golyar was hearing something else entirely. She was developing an attachment, intense, consuming, and suffocating, that had no interest in the boundaries Dave was setting. And then she found out about Cari. Now, think about this for a moment. Jealousy is human. We've all felt it. That sharp, uncomfortable pang when someone we like seems more interested in someone else. It's normal. It's manageable. For most people, it's a feeling you sit with, maybe cry about, maybe talk through with a friend, and then you move on. Shanna Golyar did not move on. There was a moment, a single, brief, almost cinematic moment that investigators believe may have been the spark that lit everything on fire. Golyar was at Krupa's apartment building, and in the hallway, just the hallway, she crossed paths with Cari Farver. A brief encounter, a few seconds, maybe a few words, maybe none at all. But Golyar saw her, saw this woman, this competitor in her mind, this person who represented everything standing between her and what she wanted. And something inside Shanna Golyar, something dark and untethered and completely beyond reason, made a decision. What happened next tells you everything about the kind of person Shanna Golyar really was underneath the ordinary surface. November 12, 2012. Cari Farver drives to Dave Krupa's apartment, near 120th and Burt Streets, Omaha. It's an ordinary evening. She's not afraid. She has no reason to be. She stays the night. The next morning, November 13th, Dave gets up, gets ready for work. He kisses Cari goodbye. She's still there, in his apartment, warm and alive and completely unaware that this is the last morning of her life. Dave leaves for work. And then, what happened? That is the question that haunted this case for years, because no one saw what came next. There were no witnesses, no security footage that captured the critical moments, no one who could say, definitively, this is what happened to Cari Farver on the morning of November 13, 2012. What investigators eventually pieced together, through evidence we'll explore in detail later, is that Cari never made it out of that apartment complex alive. The murder, investigators believe, most likely occurred inside Cari's own Ford Explorer, parked near Krupa's building. Her own car, her familiar, everyday vehicle, the one she drove through the Iowa countryside to get to work, to pick up her son, to live her life. That car became her tomb, and Shanna Golyar, who had somehow positioned herself in that parking lot, in that window of time, made sure that Cari Farver left no trace. No body has ever been found, not to this day. Here is a detail that should stop you cold. Cari's Ford Explorer, the vehicle she drove to Krupa's apartment that night, was found abandoned in the same parking lot in January 2013. 2 months later. 2 months. Just sitting there. It hadn't been driven away. It hadn't been dumped miles from the scene. It was right there, as if taunting anyone who might look closely enough, as if the person who left it there was absolutely confident that no one would find anything useful inside it. And for a long time, a painfully, agonizingly long time, they didn't. Let's zoom out for a second, because where this happened matters enormously, not just as background detail, but as an active ingredient in how this crime was committed and concealed. The Omaha Council Bluffs metropolitan area, 2 cities, 2 states, Nebraska and Iowa, separated by the Missouri River, are connected by bridges and highways and the kind of seamless daily movement that makes state lines feel almost theoretical. Cari lived in Iowa, worked in Nebraska. Golyar lived in Iowa. Krupa lived in Nebraska. Everyone was constantly crossing that invisible border back and forth as casually as you'd cross a street. And that geography created a bureaucratic gap that Golyar, whether by design or by luck, benefited from enormously. When the harassment started, when the threatening messages began flooding in, when law enforcement started getting involved, which law enforcement? Omaha police were handling the stalking complaints because the messages were targeting people in Nebraska. Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs was managing the missing persons case because Cari was from Iowa. 2 agencies, 2 jurisdictions, 2 sets of records that weren't always talking to each other in real time. And in that gap, in that bureaucratic blind spot between 2 states, Shanna Golyar operated, moved freely, staged incidents, filed reports, called for help. She didn't need to cover tracks she was carefully laying. There was one more layer to this geography. The Omaha Metro in 2012 was a region fully immersed in the smartphone era. Dating apps like Plenty of Fish had completely normalized meeting strangers online. People shared their locations, their photos, and their availability with people they'd never met in person. The digital world and the physical world were blurring together, and the rules governing that blur were still being written. Golyar understood this instinctively, or perhaps she simply took advantage of a world that hadn't yet built the defenses to stop what she was about to do. Now, let's talk about the people on the other side of this story, because without them, there is no justice here. None. The Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs, Iowa, became the unlikely home base of this investigation, and within that office, a small team of investigators took this case personally in the best possible way. Sergeant Jim Doty, Deputy Ryan Avis, and one man who would ultimately become the quiet hero of this entire story, a digital forensics expert named Anthony Kava, Tony as people called him. Tony Kava is the kind of investigator true crime stories are built around, except he's the opposite of glamorous. No dramatic car chases, no confrontations in the rain. Just a man, a computer, and an almost incomprehensible dedication to finding truth buried in data. Over the course of this investigation, Tony Kava spent more than 3,000 hours, let that sink in, 3,000 hours, combing through digital evidence, devices, accounts, metadata, timestamps, the invisible fingerprints that technology leaves behind, whether you want it to or not. And what he built from that mountain of data was a 1,000-slide PowerPoint presentation that mapped, in meticulous, irrefutable detail, the entire architecture of Shanna Golyar's deception. 1,000 slides, 3,000 hours. One man who decided that Cari Farver deserved to be found, even if all that could be found of her was the data trail she'd left behind. And Golyar? She wasn't done staging. In August 2013, 9 months after Cari vanished, Shanna Golyar set her own home on fire, her house in Persia, Iowa. Burned it down. Why? To frame Cari. To make investigators believe that this dangerous, unhinged stalker, the Cari Farver she had invented through thousands of threatening messages, had now escalated to arson, to physical violence against her. Think about the audacity of that. Think about the cold, methodical planning it requires to burn down your own home just to sell a lie. To stand in front of investigators with tears in your eyes and say, "She did this to me," knowing full well that the woman you're accusing has been dead for 9 months and can't defend herself. That's not a crime of passion. That's a production. A performance with props and a storyline and a villain. A villain that Golyar had invented to replace the real one staring back at her in the mirror. Here is how confident the evidence eventually became. When Shanna Golyar was convicted of first-degree murder in 2017, we'll get to the full story of that trial. She appealed. Of course she did. She appealed to the Nebraska Supreme Court, arguing that no one could be convicted of murder without a body, that physical remains were necessary for justice to function. The Nebraska Supreme Court disagreed, completely. They looked at the digital evidence, the forensic analysis, the 1,000-slide PowerPoint that Tony Kava built hour by hour, late night by late night, and they said, "This is enough. This is more than enough." The circumstantial and digital evidence was so overwhelming that a murder conviction could absolutely stand without a single bone or fiber of Cari Farver's physical remains. That ruling matters beyond this case. It sent a message to law enforcement agencies across the country. The digital world is a crime scene too. Learn to read it. So now you know the people. A brilliant mother who never made it home. A mechanic who thought he was just living his life. A woman whose jealousy had no ceiling and no conscience. A team of investigators who refused to close a file that the world had nearly forgotten. And a parking lot in Omaha where a Ford Explorer sat for 2 months, holding secrets that technology and one very determined forensic analyst would eventually refuse to let stay buried. But here's what we haven't talked about yet. What happened after Cari disappeared? What did the next 4 years actually look like? For Dave Krupa, for Nancy Rainey, for everyone trying to make sense of messages that seemed to be coming from a woman who had simply chosen to walk away. How does someone steal another person's entire digital identity and pull it off for nearly 4 years? That's exactly where we're going next. What would you do if you started receiving texts from someone already dead? Not knowing they were dead, of course. Just texts. Angry ones. Threatening ones. Messages that made you question everything you thought you knew about a person. Messages that arrived at 2 a.m., at noon, at Sunday morning, in the middle of dinner. Messages that never stopped. What would you think? What would anyone think? That's exactly the trap Shanna Golyar built, and it worked. For years, it worked. Because the most frightening thing about what she did wasn't the murder. As monstrous as that was, and it was monstrous, the murder lasted minutes, the lie lasted 4 years. Let's go back to the very beginning of the sequence, not November 13th, the night Cari disappeared, but a few weeks before that. Because to understand what happened, you need to understand how quickly this entire situation escalated. Early October 2012, Shanna Golyar connects with Dave Krupa on Plenty of Fish. They start dating, casual, easy. Krupa is upfront. "I'm not looking for anything serious." She says she understands. Late October 2012, Dave meets Cari Farver at his auto repair shop. They connect. They start seeing each other. Also casual, also easy. Krupa is juggling 2 women, both of whom he's been transparent with, or so he believes. But something is already wrong, because in Golyar's mind, this is not a casual arrangement. This is a competition, and competitors need to be eliminated. November 12th. Cari arrives at Krupa's apartment. She spends the night. November 13th, 2012. Dave kisses her goodbye and goes to work. And in the window of time that followed, that quiet, ordinary Tuesday morning, Shanna Golyar made a decision that cannot be undone, cannot be explained away, cannot be chalked up to a moment of madness. She committed murder. Let's be direct about what the evidence points to, because Cari Farver deserves that directness. After Dave left for work that morning, investigators believe Golyar was waiting in that parking lot near Krupa's apartment complex for her opportunity. Cari Farver was stabbed multiple times inside her own Ford Explorer, the vehicle she'd driven to Omaha the night before, the car she'd planned to drive back home to Macedonia, back to her son, back to her life. Golyar wrapped the body. She burned the remains. She disposed of them in a manner so thorough and so deliberate that, despite years of searching, Cari Farver's body has never been found. Not a bone, not a fragment, nothing. And the car? She left it, right there in the parking lot, as if Cari had simply parked and walked away. Now here is the question you have to sit with, because it reframes everything that comes next. At what point in this morning, this ordinary Tuesday morning, did Shanna Golyar transition from planning a murder, to committing it, to disposing of a body, to picking up Cari's phone and composing her first deceptive text message? How does a person do all of that, and then drive home, and then live their life as if nothing happened? The answer, as this case makes clear, is that Shanna Golyar was not operating from impulse. She was operating from a plan, a detailed, evolving, years-long plan. And it started the moment Dave Krupa walked out his front door. Within hours of the murder, Golyar had Cari's phone. Think about what that meant in 2012. A smartphone wasn't just a device, it was an entire identity. Contacts, email accounts, social media, text message history, the digital footprint of a full human life, all accessible with one passcode. Golyar cracked it, got in, and immediately began the performance. First, she sent breakup texts to Dave Krupa, messages written as Cari, explaining that things were moving too fast, that she needed space, that she was stepping back. A clean exit, nothing alarming, nothing that would make Dave pick up the phone and call Cari's family. Then she sent reassuring messages to Cari's mother, Nancy Rainey, messages that said Cari was fine, that she had taken a new job, that she'd moved to Kansas and was starting fresh. "Don't worry about me, Mom, I'm good." Imagine being Nancy Rainey. Your daughter sends you a text saying she's okay. She's moved. She's starting over. It's unexpected, maybe a little hurtful. Why didn't she tell me in person? But she sounds fine. She says she's fine. So you breathe. You worry a little, but you breathe. That breathing room, that pause before alarm, was exactly what Golyar needed. And then the messages began in earnest. Over the next 3 years, from November 2012 through December 2015, Shanna Golyar posing as Cari Farver, sent an estimated 15,000 to 18,000 emails and up to 50,000 text messages. Let that number breathe for a moment. 50,000 messages from a dead woman over 3 years. That's roughly 46 messages every single day, more than one every half hour, around the clock, for over 1,000 days. The messages started as jealous rants. Cari, or rather, the character Golyar was playing as Cari, was furious about Dave's life, his other relationships, and his refusal to commit. The tone was volatile and erratic, the kind of emotional spiral that makes people around you start whispering. And then they escalated. Threats. Dark, specific, deeply unsettling threats. Messages that made Dave Krupa feel like he was being watched, followed, hunted by a woman he'd once kissed goodbye on a Tuesday morning. Law enforcement started getting involved. Omaha police were called. Reports were filed. And what did they see? An apparently active woman, Cari Farver, harassing a man she'd briefly dated. A stalker. A problem. What they didn't see, what no one saw yet, was the person holding the phone. Here's where this case moves from disturbing to genuinely chilling from a technical standpoint. Golyar didn't just send messages from Cari's phone until the battery died. She engineered the deception. She used tools and techniques that, in the early 2010s, many law enforcement agencies were simply not equipped to untangle. Scheduling software. She pre-programmed messages to send at specific times, meaning Cari's texts could arrive while Golyar was sitting across from Dave at dinner, apparently nowhere near a phone. The illusion of an active, ever-present stalker was maintained even when Golyar was physically in the room with her victim. Multiple fake accounts. She created aliases, secondary email addresses, layered identities that created a fog of digital confusion. Trying to trace any one message was like pulling a thread that led to another thread that led to another. VPNs and IP masking tools. She routed her activity through proxies that made it extraordinarily difficult to pinpoint where messages were actually originating. Again, in 2012, 2013, 2014, most local law enforcement agencies were still developing the expertise to even recognize these techniques, let alone counter them. She wasn't just a jealous, obsessive woman firing off angry texts. She was running an operation. A sophisticated, multi-layered, technologically informed operation. And every day that it worked was another day that Cari Farver's name was attached to the label of dangerous stalker instead of what she actually was, a missing woman, a murder victim, someone whose voice had been stolen. But Golyar wasn't satisfied with just framing Cari through messages. She needed to be a victim too. She needed law enforcement and Dave Krupa to see her as someone being terrorized, not as the person doing the terrorizing. And so she committed crimes against herself. Vandalism, staged as Cari's doing, and reported via messages where Cari practically bragged about it. Break-ins at Golyar's own home, again, attributed to Farver through the ongoing message campaign. She shot herself in the leg. And initially tried to blame someone else entirely. Then, when that story didn't hold, she pivoted. Always pivoting, always adapting, always controlling the narrative. And then, in August 2013, 9 months after Cari Farver had been murdered and disposed of, Shanna Golyar walked into her own home in Persia, Iowa, and burned it down. Not just the house. Inside that house were 4 living animals, 2 dogs, a cat, a snake, her pets. She burned the house down around them, and then she pointed at the narrative she'd been building for 9 months, that unhinged, dangerous, violent Cari Farver, and said, "She did this to me." The cruelty of it is almost beyond comprehension. Not just the murder, not just the impersonation, but the willingness to destroy living things, to manufacture grief, in service of a lie, to stand before investigators, playing the traumatized victim, while the actual victim had been gone for nearly a year. So why did it take until 2016 for Golyar to be arrested? Why did this go on for 4 years? The answer is uncomfortable but important. Because the deception worked. Not forever, but long enough. Because the messages coming from Cari were so voluminous, so volatile, so apparently authentic that the default assumption was, this woman is alive and she is unstable. Not, this woman is dead and someone is performing her ghost. Because cross-jurisdictional coordination between the Omaha Police and Pottawatomie County was imperfect. Two agencies, two states, two sets of data that weren't always being viewed through the same lens at the same time. And because in the early 2010s, the idea of someone conducting a years-long digital impersonation of a murdered person was not yet a scenario that law enforcement training had fully prepared investigators to imagine. The digital forensics field was evolving in real time. The tools were new, the techniques were emerging, and Golyar was exploiting the gap between what she knew was possible and what investigators expected to find. Spring 2015, almost 2.5 years after Cari's disappearance. The case is still formally classified as a missing persons situation, intertwined with an active stalking investigation where the presumed stalker was Cari Farver herself. But something shifted at the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office. Investigators decided to go back, re-examine old evidence, re-examine old phone downloads that had been sitting in the case files, waiting, and that is when Tony Kava found the crack. Metadata. The invisible data that lives inside digital files, timestamps, device identifiers, and GPS coordinates embedded in photographs. Data that the person who took the photo never thinks about. Data that most people don't even know exists. The metadata told a different story than Golyar was telling. IP traces pointed not to some mysterious roaming Cari Farver, but back to Golyar herself. Device identifiers appeared where they shouldn't. Timestamps contradicted alibis. And then came the photographs. Photos of Cari's Ford Explorer, inside Golyar's devices, taken before the police had even officially located the vehicle. How does someone have photographs of a missing woman's car before investigators find it? How does that happen? Unless you already knew exactly where it was. Unless you put it there. But the most devastating piece of evidence was still waiting on a tiny piece of hardware. An old micro SD card. The kind of small, easily forgotten storage chip that you slide into a phone or a camera and then lose track of. This one had previously been inside Golyar's phone. It ended up on a tablet, and when Tony Kava recovered the deleted files from it, thousands of images that Golyar had thought were gone forever, he found something that stopped the investigation cold. 2 photographs. A deceased person's foot, bearing a tattoo, a Chinese character meaning mother. Cari Farver had that tattoo. A medical examiner confirmed what the photographs showed. The foot in those images belonged to someone dead. Trophy photos, that's what investigators called them. Photographs taken of a murder victim, kept, held onto, stored on a device that Golyar had carried with her, lived with, and believed no one would ever find. Why does someone take photographs like that? It's a question that criminal psychologists have long wrestled with. But the conclusion it pointed to, the devastating, irrefutable conclusion, was that Shanna Golyar had not just killed Cari Farver, she had documented it. And they went back to the car. Cari's Ford Explorer, which had been examined before, was re-examined with fresh eyes and more advanced techniques. And this time, investigators found what earlier searches had missed: blood, hidden beneath the passenger seat fabric. Cari Farver's blood, concealed, but not erased. Because blood, as it turns out, is extraordinarily difficult to make disappear completely, especially when someone has taken the time to scrub the visible surfaces, but hasn't thought to lift the seat lining. The car told the story that Golyar had spent 4 years trying to prevent anyone from reading. December 22, 2016, Shanna Golyar was arrested. The investigation that Tony Kava had poured more than 3,000 hours into was now headed to court. And the trial that followed was historic, not because of dramatic courtroom confrontations, but because of the evidence. The sheer, meticulous, overwhelming volume of digital and forensic evidence that told the story of a 4-year lie. It was a bench trial, meaning a judge, not a jury, would decide the verdict. Judge Timothy Burns in Douglas County, Nebraska. Golyar chose this, perhaps believing that the complexity of the digital evidence would be harder for a single legal mind to weave into a coherent narrative of guilt. She was wrong. On August 15, 2017, Judge Burns delivered his verdict. Guilty, first-degree murder, second-degree arson. The sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder, plus a consecutive 18 to 20 years for the arson. Golyar maintained her innocence. She has always maintained her innocence. She claimed, and continues to claim, that the real killer is still out there somewhere. Free, unidentified. A phantom who has never materialized because they don't exist. In 2018, the Nebraska Supreme Court reviewed the conviction on appeal and upheld it completely. In doing so, they established something that will echo through the legal system for decades to come, that a murder conviction can stand without a recovered body, as long as the circumstantial and digital evidence is overwhelming enough to leave no reasonable doubt. As of 2026, Shanna Golyar remains at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women. Cari Farver's remains have still never been found. And we have to ask it, don't we? We have to ask the question that sits underneath all of this. Why? Why does a person do this? Not just the murder, but the years of sustained, elaborate, psychologically exhausting performance that came after it? What kind of obsession does that require? What kind of inner life produces something like this? The motive, as investigators and psychologists framed it, was classic romantic obsession turned lethal. Golyar had decided, somewhere in the early days of her casual relationship with Dave Krupa, that he was hers. Not because he'd said so, not because they'd agreed to anything, but because she had decided it, and in her internal world, that decision was final. Cari Farver wasn't a person to Golyar. She was an obstacle, a variable to be removed from an equation. And the 3-year performance that followed the murder wasn't chaos. It had clear, interlocking goals. Cover up the crime by making it look like Cari was alive. Position Golyar as a fellow victim to maintain Dave's sympathy and proximity, and systematically destroy Cari's reputation so that if anyone ever did start asking questions, they'd already be looking in the wrong direction. Jealousy, obsession, control. 3 things that, left unchecked and unchallenged, can transform a human being into something unrecognizable. The Netflix documentary Lover, Stalker, Killer brought this case to millions of new viewers in 2024. Leslie Rule's book A Tangled Web explored it in rich, reported detail. And every time a new audience discovers this story, the same questions surface. Could this happen again? Could someone steal your digital identity this completely? Could your name, your phone number, your accounts, your voice be turned against the people you love, while you lie somewhere unable to speak for yourself? The uncomfortable answer is, the technology has only become more powerful since 2012. The tools for impersonation have multiplied. The platforms have expanded. And while digital forensics has also advanced enormously, this case helped advance it. The gap between what a determined, tech-savvy individual can do and what law enforcement can immediately detect still exists. This case also sparked critical conversations about cyberstalking legislation, cross-jurisdictional coordination between agencies, and the responsibility that online dating platforms have when their systems are exploited for manipulation and harm. So now you know what happened, and when, and why, and how. You know about 50,000 messages from a ghost, trophy photographs on a micro SD card, blood hidden under a car seat that survived every attempt to erase it. You know about a woman who burned her own home, shot herself, staged her own victimhood, and nearly got away with all of it. But here's what's still left to explore. What does this case mean beyond the courtroom? What happened to the people left behind? To Dave Krupa, to Nancy Rainey, to Cari's son, who grew up without his mother? What is the legacy of Cari Farver's life beyond the tragedy of her death? And what has this case changed in law, in technology, in the way we think about safety in a world where our entire identities live inside a small glass rectangle in our pockets? That's Chapter 3, and it might be the most important part of all. When a case ends in a courtroom, when the gavel comes down and the verdict is read and the sentence is handed out, we have a tendency to close the book. Justice served. Story over. Move on. But that's not how it works for the people who actually lived it. For them, the story doesn't end when the handcuffs go on. It doesn't end when the judge speaks. It doesn't even end when the appeals run out and the prison doors close for good. For them, it just continues. A quieter kind of suffering. A grief with no finish line. And so this final chapter is not about the crime. It's not about the conviction. It's about what gets left behind. What scars. What changes. What endures. And because this story refuses to be only about darkness, what grows. Let's start with a mother. Because Nancy Rainey's experience of this case is something that I don't think gets talked about enough. And it should. Because what she went through is its own particular devastating kind of cruelty. One that Shanna Golyar designed with intention. Nancy lost her daughter on November 13th, 2012. But she didn't know she'd lost her. Not for years. Instead, she received texts, messages, apparently from Cari, saying she was fine. She'd moved to Kansas. New job, fresh start, don't worry. The kind of message a mother reads and feels that complicated mix of hurt and relief. Hurt that her daughter didn't call, didn't explain in person, but relief because she's okay. She sounds okay. So Nancy worried, but she didn't sound the alarm, not immediately. And every day that she held on to the hope that Cari had simply moved away and lost touch, every one of those days, was a day that Shanna Golyar had bought herself, manufactured, stolen from a grieving family by forging the voice of the person they were missing. Can you imagine the moment Nancy Rainey understood the truth? Those texts weren't from her daughter, that her daughter had been gone the entire time, that the messages she'd held onto, maybe reread, maybe found comfort in, were lies, written by the woman who had killed her child? There are forms of cruelty that the law struggles to name. What Golyar did to Nancy Rainey is one of them. And then compound that with this. There was never a body to bury. There still isn't. No grave, no place to go on a hard day and sit quietly and feel close to someone you've lost. No physical, tangible proof that Cari Farver existed in this world. Beyond photographs, memories, and the people who loved her. That absence, that permanent, unresolvable absence, is its own wound, one that doesn't close. And then there is Cari's son. He was a teenager when his mother disappeared, old enough to understand that something was deeply wrong, young enough that the years of uncertainty, the missing persons limbo, the stalking case, the slow crawl toward truth, consumed what should have been formative years of his life. He grew up without answers, and then, when answers finally came, they were the worst possible kind. His mother hadn't left. She hadn't lost touch. She hadn't chosen a new life in Kansas over her life with him. She had been murdered in a parking lot on an ordinary Tuesday morning by a woman consumed by a jealousy that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with destroying his world. The law convicted Shanna Golyar of murder, but no sentence, no verdict, no documentary, no scholarship fund can give that young man back the years he spent not knowing where his mother was. That is a cost that cannot be calculated, cannot be compensated, cannot be undone. Dave Krupa has spoken publicly about what this case did to him. And he doesn't mince words. He has said, clearly, directly, without softening it, that Shanna Golyar ruined my life. Think about what he endured. Years of relentless harassment, supposedly from a woman he'd briefly and casually dated. Thousands of threatening messages. The psychological weight of believing you are being hunted. The paranoia of not knowing where the next message would come from, or what it would say, or whether it would escalate into something physical. He went to police. He filed reports. He tried to protect himself. But how do you protect yourself from a ghost? From someone who, as far as anyone knew, was an apparently alive and apparently dangerous woman who simply wouldn't stop. And layered underneath all of that, the horrible, disorienting knowledge that now colors everything, is this. The woman he thought was stalking him was already dead. The woman he'd thought was sending those messages had been murdered. And the person sending them, the person he'd also dated, the person who had sat across from him at dinner and listened to him describe his harassment problem, she was the one causing it. That kind of psychological whiplash doesn't just heal with time. It rewires things. It changes the way you trust, the way you read people, the way you move through a world that turned out to be far more dangerous and deceptive than you ever imagined. Dave Krupa is a stalking survivor, and his story, the story of a man whose ordinary life was used as the stage for someone else's obsession, deserves to be told alongside Cari's. Not instead of it, alongside it. Now let's zoom out from the personal and look at the systemic, because this case didn't just reveal one woman's capacity for violence, it revealed gaps. Real, significant gaps in the way law enforcement, technology platforms, and the legal system were equipped to handle a crime of this nature in the early 2010s. The first gap was jurisdictional. 2 states, 2 agencies, a missing persons case on one side of the Missouri River, and a stalking case on the other. Both sets of investigators working hard, but not always working together in real time, not always seeing the full picture that only becomes visible when you put every piece of evidence side by side. In that gap, Golyar operated freely. She crossed state lines as easily as anyone in the metro area. She staged crimes in Iowa, filed reports in Nebraska, and moved between both without anyone, for a long time, connecting every dot. The second gap was assumptions. The early assumption, a reasonable one on the surface, was that Cari Farver was alive and unstable, alive and dangerous, alive and harassing people. That assumption shaped how the evidence was read for years. When investigators are looking at the evidence through the lens of where is the stalker, rather than where is the victim, they will find very different things. This is not a criticism of the investigators, it's a recognition of how deception works at its most sophisticated. Golyar didn't just fool individuals, she fooled systems, and that's harder to defend against. The third gap was technological. Digital forensics as a field was evolving rapidly in the early 2010s, but it was still catching up to the tools that bad actors were already using. VPNs, scheduling apps, proxy servers, multiple fake accounts. These weren't exotic spy tools. They were consumer-grade software, available to anyone, and many law enforcement agencies were still building the training and infrastructure to track and interpret that kind of digital behavior. But here's the other side of that story. Because this case also demonstrated, definitively, powerfully, what can go right when investigators refuse to quit. Tony Kava. 3,000 hours, 1,000 slides. That number, 3,000 hours, works out to more than 125 consecutive days of work. More than 4 months if you never slept, never ate, never stopped. Spread across a real investigation with real constraints, it represents an almost incomprehensible personal commitment to finding truth in data. And what he found changed everything, because metadata doesn't lie. Deleted files don't fully disappear. Device identifiers persist. Timestamps tell stories that human memories distort or forget. The digital world, despite all of Golyar's efforts to weaponize it, ultimately held the receipts. This case demonstrated something that law enforcement agencies across the country were still learning to believe: that the digital world is a crime scene. That evidence lives in phones and servers and SD cards and app logs. That a forensic analyst with the right tools and the right training can walk through a crime that left no physical body and still build a case that sends someone to prison for life. And the Nebraska Supreme Court agreed. Their 2018 ruling, upholding Golyar's conviction without a recovered body, sent a message that has echoed through the legal community ever since. We live in a digital age, and justice must be equipped to function in it. That ruling matters for every no-body murder case that comes after this one. It matters for investigators who are building cases from metadata and deleted files and IP addresses. It matters for victims whose remains may never be found, but whose killers should not walk free because of it. This case arrived at a specific, pivotal moment in our cultural history. 2012 was the height of the first great wave of mainstream online dating. Smartphones had become ubiquitous. Apps like Plenty of Fish, Match, and the freshly launched Tinder were reshaping the way people met, connected, and let strangers into their lives. The world was still figuring out the rules, and Shanna Golyar exploited every unwritten rule, every unguarded door, every assumption that the person on the other side of a screen was who they claimed to be. The Cari Farver case forces us to ask questions that are still deeply relevant in 2026, arguably more relevant now than they were then. How much do we really know about the people we meet online? How easily can a determined person exploit the platforms we use to connect? If someone stole your digital identity today, your phone, your accounts, your email, how long would it take the people who love you to realize something was wrong? And when they did, how equipped would law enforcement be to help them? The weaponization of digital identity is not a hypothetical. It happened. It happened to a real woman, a real mother, a real software developer who understood the digital world better than most. And it still happened to her. The lesson isn't to retreat from technology. The lesson is to take its power seriously, on both sides, the power to connect and the power to deceive. And now, because this story refuses to end in only darkness, let's talk about what has grown from this tragedy. Iowa Western Community College, Council Bluffs, Iowa, right there in the heart of the metro area where this story unfolded. The Cari Farver Memorial Scholarship. It supports students studying information technology, future software developers, digital analysts, cybersecurity professionals, the next generation of people who will work in the field that Cari herself loved and excelled in. By early 2026, the scholarship fund had raised approximately $85,000. Donations surged following the release of the Netflix documentary Lover, Stalker, Killer in 2024, which brought millions of new viewers to this story, and, for many of them, an immediate desire to do something meaningful with the grief and outrage that the story provoked. Think about what that scholarship represents. It takes the name of a woman whose identity was stolen, whose voice was hijacked, whose digital life was weaponized against everyone she loved, and restores it, rebuilds it, reattaches it to something generative. Every student who receives that scholarship carries Cari's name forward. Every career built on that foundation is a small, quiet, meaningful refusal to let Shanna Golyar have the final word on what Cari Farver's life meant. That is not a small thing. That is justice of a different kind. The kind that doesn't come from a courtroom, but from a community that decided, consciously, collectively, that this woman's story would be about more than how she died. Lover, Stalker, Killer, Netflix, 2024. When it dropped, it reached audiences who had never heard of Cari Farver, Dave Krupa, or Shanna Golyar. Millions of people watching from living rooms around the world, confronting this story for the first time, and often emerging from it changed. True crime documentaries get a complicated reputation. And sometimes that reputation is deserved, but at their best, they do something that court records and news articles can't quite replicate. They make you feel the weight of what happened to real human beings. They make the names mean something. Lover, stalker, killer sparked conversations on social media, in podcasts, around dinner tables, about cyberstalking, about online dating safety, about the invisible vulnerability of our digital identities, about the extraordinary work that investigators like Tony Kava do in the shadows, away from cameras and headlines, for thousands of hours at a time, and about Cari, about who she was, not just how she died, about her son, about her mother, about the scholarship that carries her name into a future she never got to see. Leslie Rule's book, A Tangled Web, added another layer, the deep, reported, page-by-page examination of how this deception was built and eventually dismantled. For readers who wanted to understand the mechanics of what happened, it offered something documentaries can't: time and space to sit with the details. Together, these works have made the Cari Farver case one of the most examined and discussed true crime stories of the digital era. And with every new conversation it sparks, the warning it carries travels a little further. As of 2026, here is where things are. Shanna Golyar remains incarcerated at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women. No successful further appeals have been reported. Life without parole is, barring extraordinary and unlikely legal developments, exactly what it says: life. She maintains her innocence. She has always maintained her innocence. The phantom real killer she claims exists has never materialized, because there is no phantom. There is only the evidence, the metadata, the deleted photos, the blood under the car seat fabric, the 1,000-slide PowerPoint, and what it unambiguously says. Cari Farver's remains have still never been found. Her body is still out there somewhere, or what's left of it, in a location that only one person knows and has chosen not to share with the people who loved her. That is the one thing the legal system cannot compel. The one thing that justice, as thorough and hard-won as it was in this case, could not fully deliver. Nancy Rainey lives without a grave to visit. Cari's son lives without a place to say goodbye. And yet, the scholarship exists. The documentary exists. The conversation continues. The forensic precedent stands. The investigators who worked this case know that they found truth in data when the physical world had been scrubbed clean. That is not everything, but it is not nothing. So what do we take from this? What is the lesson? If a story this dark and this complicated is allowed to have one, maybe it's this. Technology is not neutral. It is a tool, and like every tool in human history, its character depends entirely on the hands that hold it. Golyar used it to deceive, to terrorize, to prolong injustice. Tony Kava used it to unravel that deception, to find truth in places most people wouldn't have thought to look, to give a dead woman her name back. The same digital world that enabled a 4-year murder cover-up also exposed it. The same metadata that Golyar generated unknowingly, the invisible fingerprints of her deception, became the evidence that put her away for life. The same smartphone era that allowed a killer to impersonate her victim for tens of thousands of messages also produced the forensic tools that read those messages like a confession. There is something almost poetic about that symmetry, and something deeply instructive, because the lesson isn't to fear technology, it's to respect it, to understand what it reveals about us, willingly and unwillingly. To recognize that in a world where our digital lives are as real and as consequential as our physical ones, we need to take the security of those lives as seriously as we take the locks on our doors. And for law enforcement, the lesson is equally clear. The crime scene of the 21st century is not always a physical location. It's a device, a server, a metadata timestamp on a photograph taken in a parking lot. The investigators who learn to read those scenes, who put in the hours, who build the expertise, who refuse to close the file because the evidence is hard to find, those are the ones who deliver justice in cases where justice once seemed impossible. Cari Farver deserved better than what happened to her. There is no reframing that away. She deserved to drive home that Tuesday morning, to hug her son, to go to work, to keep building the life she was building. She didn't get that. And that fact sits at the center of this story, unmoving and irreducible. But she got her name back. She got a scholarship in her honor. She got millions of people around the world learning who she was, not just how she died. She got a courtroom where the evidence of her life, her presence, her very blood spoke loudly enough to convict the woman who silenced her. She got remembered, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that is the most powerful thing we can offer the dead. The murder of Cari Farver is a story about jealousy, about obsession, about what human beings are capable of when they decide that another person is an obstacle rather than a life. But it is also a story about persistence, about the investigators who refused to let the data stay buried, about the legal system that adapted to a new kind of evidence, about a community that took a tragedy and built something from it. And it is a warning, one that we should carry with us into every app we open, every profile we swipe, every digital door we leave unlocked. Our identities live online. Protect them like they matter, because for Cari Farver, the moment she lost control of hers was the moment the world lost her. Don't let that be a story anyone else has to tell about you. If this story made you think differently, about people, about systems, about the thin line between who someone appears to be and who they actually are, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not for the shock, for the conversation it starts. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. New cases, real psychology, no easy answers. And drop a comment below. I read everyone. What part of this story stayed with you?